Welcome to the first ever episode of Budget Builder, the series where I, Toaster Party, talk about budget decks, and what I came up with today is under $50 Simorgh. A little bit of history on Simorgh is that Simorgh used to have used to be just like a boss monster thing from the GX era that didn't really do anything, but hated back row a lot. Recently, and I think it was Rising Rampage, it received a archetype. And today I'm going to discuss the deck I was able to come up with for under $50 that you could probably take to locals and do pretty well with. As you can see, I don't have a complete extra deck here, but that's because these are the 12 cards that I deemed actually worth playing, and you can probably cut one win from this, but the rest of these seem like all cards you could just pick up, and they're the only ones you don't, and you pretty much could use all of these. But let's actually talk about the deck so far. First up, we have 2 Darkness Simorgh. It's not the greatest card in the deck, but it's kind of like this deck's Garnet because you have to run 2 Dark Simorghs, and these are the only 2 actually worth playing. I thought about running this, but it just seems even more extremely bricky than the new Dark Simorgh, because you need Darkness Simorgh to be able to play Simorgh Onslaught, which lets you search up any 2 Simorgh monsters, but they have to be different attributes, which is kind of lame that you have to play these 2. And I'm playing 2 because drawing 1 makes Simorgh Onslaught a dead card. But the card is special summonable off of a card that I'm going to show later, but because the tribute of a Darker Wind type monster to special summon from Graveyard effect isn't really going to do anything because you're never tribute summoning in this deck. The second effect is the actual applicable one. You won't make this card very often, but you can use it as a sack it itself to negate something, a spell or trap specifically. But in particular, the card you're going to be playing more often here is Mist Valley Apex Avian, a card that lets you quick effect, bounce itself, and then negate an activation of any monster spell or trap effect. It's a very solid card, and a card that this deck aims to cheese into play as often as possible. Without further ado, let's go on to the little Simorghs. We got 3 Bird of Protection. Bird of Protection is kind of the worst one because of the small ones, because this deck really wants to go first, and your opponents aren't going to have a lot of back row to bounce going first. You have to run 3 because you need as many of the small Simorghs as possible, and the bounce effect is sometimes relevant. We have 1 Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds, probably the most expensive card in the deck, being a little above $5. But it's a card that can be cheesed into play using Simorgh Bird of Kings, and making this on turn 1 off of the bird, or big bird, can sometimes just win you the game. Then you have one of the actual good tiny Simorghs, which is Bird of Calamity. It foolishes 1 bird from deck to graveyard, and as you can see between Bird of Protection and Bird of Calamities here, all of the Simorghs have this effect that if your opponent has no back row, you can special summon it from graveyard to field, but banish it after it leaves the field the second time. So getting to put 1 extra 1 in graveyard makes it much easier to go into Big Bird, which is the big battle plan of this deck. We have 2 copies of Ghost Ogre because it's only $2 and it's still a very good hand trap for this format. We have 3 of Best Bird, which is Simorgh Bird Summoning, which essentially lets you tutor up any Simorgh card from your deck to hand. This means you can get either more Simorgh monsters, you can get you the spell, which lets you search up more monsters if you need it, or the Double Summon, which has dual effect in this deck because it's both a double summon effect and a way to sometimes summon these from your hand if you're really desperate. And it also allows you to get protection onto some more Bird of Kings, because this entire deck is just based around this card right here. The whole reason this deck should exist is because you want to make this. I should probably at this point just go ahead and talk about this card real quick. When your opponent can't target this card or Winged Beast card, this points to with card effects. So it's just really hard to get rid of without battle. And if you're making this, then you're not going to get easily destroyed by battle. And if it would be destroyed by battle, you can destroy one other Simorgh card, aka the field spell. But the most important line on this card is during the end phase, you can special summon one winged beast monster from your deck or hand with a level equal to or lower than the total number of unused spell and trap zones on the field. You can use this effect once per turn. So the main thing that you're wanting to do is to cheese out stuff like Barrier Statue of the Storm ones to lock out your opponents from special summoning, or Mist Valley Apex Avian to just negate everything. And it happens every end step. So this deck has like insane grind game as long as you can keep the bird on field. It's sort of like a protect the castle type strategy where you want to keep this thing on field and you just can keep spitting stuff out of your deck. And the options to spit out are very good. So back to the listed hand. You have the Searcher, aka the one you want to spit out. Or you can get to draw into more extenders to help you get into bird turn 1. DD Crow, just another really solid hand trap that also has the card text of Winged Beast, so it sometimes can come up when you have to normal summon it. Simorgh of Beginnings. It gives you a double summon effect on summon, so as long as you have another bird, you can go like Bird of Beginnings into Bird of Summoning, or Bird of Summoning, search this, go into Bird of Beginnings, go into another one, and then you got your Bird of Kings right there. 2 Effect Veiler, just another really good budget hand trap. 1 Instant Fusion to help sort of boost the likelihood that you'll hit another monster to be able to go into Big Bird on turn 1. Also, you have your 2 targets. You have a Winged Beast, because of course you need Wind and Winged Beasts to make a lot of cards in your extra deck, so this one's just a very solid pick. And then if you're going second, you have Thousand-Eyes Restrict, just to sort of give you a bit more application for this card. 1 for 1, just to get you into more Winged Beast monsters, so that you can, again, go into Bird. Arrival/Onslaught, the card that searches up stuff that requires you to run this terrible card. This one, which you really only want to run 1 of, because it says discard 1 Winged Beast monster, return all your opponent's spells and traps to their hand. Then you can banish this card from the graveyard and then reduce the levels of monsters in your hand, blah blah blah, that part doesn't matter. This one, again, really is only useful for going second, and you only run 1 copy because you can search it off Bird of Summoning. Terraforming, because this deck needs to get off 2 summons usually before it can get to Big Bird. Foolish Burial, to get you more birds in graveyard to special summon them back so you can, again, get into Big Bird. Monster Born, Big Bird. Called by the Grave, the other expensive card in this deck. One of the deck's main weaknesses is getting hand trapped at the wrong time. You can play around the ones that this one usually, or that this deck would normally struggle with, or the other decks that struggle with, like Nibiru. So this card isn't really for those, but for other hand traps like Effect Veiler, Ghost Ogre, you can't really play around those as well. So that's why you gotta run Called by the Grave, because you really need to get off enough summons to get into the bird. As I said, it's a double summon and it increases attack, blah blah blah, sometimes results in the summoning of this from hand. 3 Solemn Judgment, because going first and getting lightning stormed or some evenly matched after you've used your Apex Avian to negate something else is not fun, but like this card's super cheap. Onto the extra deck, we already went over these. Borreload Dragon, because you need some way to close out a game on a budget. Silger, the Desperate Doom Eagle, which is another way to close out a game, and is also a DD Crow on a Link 3. You can sometimes make this card on turn 1 if you really want to extend, if you don't want to play around Nibiru. It's very easy if you get all of the birds on field without using their graveyard effects, because then you can just use all their graveyard effects, make 3 more monsters, make this all over again. And finally, again, the most important card. It's really easy to make 3 birds with most hands. There's a handful of bad ones where you don't get to make bird very easily. This to make sure that even if you only have 2 birds in hand, that you can reborn one of them using their graveyard effect to be able to still make Big Bird. This as a back row removal piece from the extra deck. This to go for OTKs if you can't go into Borreload. This one because you have a lot of level 1s in the deck, and like Revo's just a good card. Almirage, similar reasons, you can easily make this card, and it's just a very solid card. Then we have the side. I don't have a side deck for this because I could, or the format's a bit strange right now, but I just put in a bunch of cards that I considered if this was not a budget deck. Dark Simorgh's only in here because it's the one I considered instead of running the Darkness Simorgh, but it's not as applicable as this one will be. You can sometimes summon it, but more often than this one would get summoned, but it's just not as good, and you can make this one off of Big Bird. More Effect Veilers because that's a good card. I also came up with a funny combo where you can easily make the Big Bird off of Jet Synchron, where you normal Jet Synchron to make Halqifibrax make a tuner Wing Beast, which then makes Simorgh, because reasons. But again, these are expensive, or this is an expensive card, but it's probably one of these two cards is probably getting banned soon, so by the time you can actually probably play this in paper, it's not really worth running. And Permanence, because it's the best hand trap. I've thought of Extravagance if you had money for this, or had a lot more money that you want to throw into this deck, you could, or if you just have one of these lying around, this would be a good way to help you draw into your stuff, and you could just pump up the numbers on stuff like Big Bird and this. Everything else is kind of negligent. You don't really need anything else aside from maybe, or just you need a link to be able to go into just to put the things engraved to summon them back, because the only thing you're really doing in this deck is trying to make big birds and grind out the game. Access Code Talker, again, because this deck kind of struggles to OTK, because it's not, because there's cards that just lock you into Winged Beasts, specifically the Grave Effect of the bird, so if you can make this after you've prevented your opponent from winning on turn 2, by just going into this on turn 3 and going punch for game. Nibiru, just one of the strongest hand traps. $20 though, so. Nightmare Phoenix, probably one of the better cards you could go into off instead of Firefighting Darmadol, but Nightmare's Unicorn Cerberus, again, just really good generic cards. Boral Sword, because again, your deck doesn't OTK very well. This one for the same reason. Ash, very good hand trap, just unevenly matched, because going second with this deck is terrible. I'd probably say one of the most important ones you would want to add if you quit the whole budget idea is probably evenly matched, because again, the deck's one of the biggest problems is trying to go second, and you have good hand traps, but trying to remove a lot of pieces can be difficult, so this is the card I probably recommend the most if you wanted to remove the budget cap. But you can get this entire 40 card deck in this 12 card extra deck for under $50, and it's probably closer to just 40, because this is 10 cents, this is 10 cents, this is like 50 cents, 10, 10, 10, $5, 10, 10, 10 cents, $2, 10 cents, 10 cents, 10 cents, $1, more 10 cents, another $1, 50, 50, maybe 10 cents even. Again, all the Simorgh cards are just super cheap, and the only expensive cards you really need are this $5 card, these 3 $5 cards. These $2 cards are just nice to have, and these, because these other $2 cards, because they're just nice. And the rest of this is all just super cheap. Well, I hope you enjoyed my video, and I think I'm going to be uploading some replays of me playing this deck to show you how it works. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have an excellent day.